PM Express tonight, a big boost for the Ghanaian economy. The reopening of the Obuasi mine, of the Angogo Ashanti Obuasi mine. It's been a day yesterday of a lot of excitement, and rightly so. The mine was shut some time back, and after a long wait, it's finally back. And the president said something that I guess formed the basis of this discussion. And he said, and we'll examine it on the screen shortly, that he doesn't want us to return to the time when the challenges led to the shutdown of the mine. And that's why we're asking the question, lessons learned. Let's go back a bit. The Angogo Ashanti gold mine in Obuasi has been closed since 2014. Those who live there will tell you. However, 22-year life of the mine now, with the reopening, we expect that from the figures that we were given yesterday, we produced 400,000 ounces of gold per annum with the reopening, 22 years life of mine, total of $1.6 billion to be reinvested for the 22-year period. These are huge figures that we are talking about here. Very expensive venture. Government expects to rake in, and you can do the statistics for yourself, government expects to rake in $2.16 billion in revenue, royalties and withholding tax over the period of 22 years. And this, I guess, is a part where it begins to touch lives, right? 2,500 jobs estimated to be created just because of the reopening of the mine alone. Now you begin to appreciate why I said a big boost for the economy already. It includes the redesigned underground mine, very expensive venture, refurbished and upgraded the underground as well. We understand surface infrastructure to support efficient operations have been introduced. Government says the mine must work to transform the town for the better. Another thing that we'll be talking about here, I recall when the mine shut down in 2014, we sent reporters there to try and do the story, and the place was a ghost town. The people started complaining about, after decades of mining, we haven't seen the benefits. The mine is gone, and we are back to where we were. Obuasi is largely undeveloped. The president talked about that again, and again indicating this time things will be different. How specifically are we going to get that done? Well, the president says they will enforce the laws to stop encroachment on the concessions of the mines, and that's an important thing for the businesses like Angogo Ashanti, having pumped in a lot of money already. Assurance that the sequence, and this is the part I was referring to, and this is a very important statement from the president, the sequence of events that led to the closure of the mine will not recur under the watch of this government, the president assured. And tonight we'll be trying to understand and flesh that out a bit more, just to examine this question. So what are the specific steps government is taking to ensure events that led to the closure of the mine will not recur, as the president is as assured? How do you meet the president's own expectation? That is a huge thing to do. He's expecting that won't happen again, but there must be specific steps that takes us there. Stay with us here. This is going to affect lives across the country. If you look at $2 billion that we're expecting to make, and so you need to pay attention to this as it's playing out, not only in Obuasi, but in the Ghanaian economy. And that's what we'll be interrogating with my guest after the break. Stay with us here on PM Express. My guest in the studio, Barbara Otenjesi, Deputy Minister, Lands and Natural Resources. Thank you, Madam Otenjesi, for your time here on PM Express. Also with us in the studio is Eric Subontin. He's the Managing Director of Angogo Ashanti. He's a big man himself. Joins us on set. I'm grateful that you joined us, sir. In the studio also with us is a man who has worked in this industry for decades. Dr. Steve Mateo. He is the co-chair of the Ghana Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. Doc, thank you for your time here on PM Express. Congratulations are in order, Madam Otenjesi, and obviously also Mr. Subontin. I want to start with you, Madam Otenjesi. How did you pull this off? Because in 2014, I remember when this went down, the story ran for weeks. It was almost as if the world has come to an end for the people in Obuasi and Ashanti region in the economy. Nobody thought that this could be possible, at least in the short term. What happened? How did you pull it off?
Thank you very much. I think that we have to ascribe it to the determination of His Excellency the President, because he was determined that once he got power as President of the country, he would ensure that the Obuasi mine came back into operations. Because we all know Obuasi is an icon in the mining industry of Ghana. It has gained us international recognition and acclaim. And if you look at the economy of the Obuasi area, which was highly dependent on the mine, once the mine ceased to operate, as you said, when you went there, it had become a ghost town. Yeah. And we could not let that persist. So whatever had to be done to ensure that the mine could come back into operations had to be done. And that is where we started from. And we took on the negotiations. And together with the team from Anglo Gold, and their determination also to get the mine operational again, looking at all the challenges they had faced and developing a new operational model, we were able to achieve this feat.
We'll come to the specifics shortly, but Eric, this has been a journey, a tough one for you. And I just was listening to the minister there. There must have been a lot of talking, but a lot of millions and millions in the conversation as well to get this up and running.
Certainly, I mean, it's been a tough journey. When we encountered the challenges we had in 2014, it's not as if we knew exactly what was going to happen, but those were difficult decisions that we needed to make. Because we had gotten to the point where we couldn't fix the mine on the run. And the example I always use is trying to change the wheel of a vehicle whilst it's in motion.
Okay.
We had tried those things, but it wasn't working. So we decided to put a stop, take a step back, conduct a feasibility study, see how best we can, if we can revive it in the first place, how best we can revive it, and then go convince our stakeholders, including the government of Ghana, to secure the necessary agreements that we need to ensure that we could make the investment decision to bring the mine back. So it's been a tough journey, as you said. And in the process, I mean, the expectations have been there from our local stakeholders, and we've had to also convince our investors to see things as we wanted them to see to make that big decision.
How much have you had to invest in this over the last 4 years to make this
To
reality?
give you an idea, in stopping the mine and in retrenching the employees, you know, we retrenched the entire employees that we had.
I think you have 4,000 workers.
It was in excess of 4,000. It cost us about over $240 million to do that.
Okay, and if you want to break it down, that will go into severance packages, etc.
It's mainly severance packages. It's mainly severance packages. This is no other cost, just paying off people.
200 million.
In excess of $240 million. Dollars. That could buy several mines in its own right. But we have a commitment, and we have values as a company, and we can't let employees go without meeting our full obligations. So we did that very smoothly.
You didn't expect to come back because you sort of paid everybody off.
Yeah,
you didn't expect to come back.
It made sense to make that decision, even if you expected to come back. But I think in the course of the conversation, I'll get a chance to step you through that. So we had to incur that cost. After that, we then had to spend money to conduct a feasibility study to determine first if the mine was viable to be resurrected, and then secondly, if so, how are you going to do it? What operating model are you going to use? Whilst all this was going on and the mine remained in care and maintenance, we didn't renege on our environmental liabilities as well as our social obligations. So we continued to spend between $50 million to $60 million a year just to make sure that we maintained the infrastructure of the mine so that we don't flood the mine, because once you flood the mine, it becomes extremely difficult to reopen it. So we had to spend all that money to make sure that it continues. All the key things that we support the society or the community with, for instance, the hospital we run, the school we operate, the AGA malaria control program, all continued during this phase, even though we weren't producing. And that's how come we were spending between $50 million to $60 million a year, of course, including dewatering and maintaining the facilities. We did also keep employee size of about 300 just to keep these programs going. So it cost a lot of money. Now we are where we are now, and the money we have to pump in to redevelop the mine is even bigger. And you would notice from the speeches made yesterday that we intend spending about $881 million over an initial period of about 6 years. So this is big sums of money, and if we didn't believe in the jurisdiction we are operating in terms of the comfort we get with the business environment, obviously we wouldn't be making such big investment decisions. Yeah.
Well, these are dizzying figures and that you've been putting out, and I'll come back to Madam Tujusi on the specifics of what government also had to put in. But your initial reaction, Dr. Mattel, to this. Yesterday, a lot of the people in Obuasi, there was jubilation. The town is back to life with excitement. You shared in that excitement?
Of course, as a Ghanaian, I share in the excitement. It's good news for us. Every foreign direct investment that comes into the economy is good news for all Ghanaians, but especially for the host communities because they are beneficiaries of CSR projects. But again, more importantly, they have a share in the royalties that AGA will be paying to government. For me, what is important is the lessons we all learn from the history of Obuasi. How is it that we came to a point when the closure of one company led to the death of a whole district? These are the lessons. You'll find by and large that the mining in this country has been an enclave, not integrated into the rest of the national economy, for which reason we are not able to optimize our benefits from the sector. Everybody wants to work in the mine, but the mine can employ so much.
I want to work in the mine.
For me, the challenge, exactly, because
I'm being honest.
The money is good.
Yeah.
Yes.
But for me, Minister Tujusi, you having to aspire to work in the mine. When we're growing up, when they say work in the mine, Charlie, you're rich.
Yes.
But that's the thing, right?
Yeah, but the challenge really is how do we create jobs outside the mine, even though they may be dependent on the mine, so they can absorb much more labor than the mine itself is able to absorb. And that, for me, is a critical thinking that we need to be doing as a people.
And we'll have that conversation because the president himself has that expectation. In fact, and I made that quote earlier that he says, not under our watch are we going to return to where we were, that the challenges that led to the collapse of the shutdown of the mine, the first in 2014. So it's important to sort of flesh that out a bit more to see if we are on course in learning the lessons, but implementing and applying those lessons to this new regime. Madam Tujusi, so coming back to the role of government in this, in specific terms though, what did we have to do? I read the president say, in order to help, I'm quoting him, in order to help Anglo Ashanti secure the needed investment for this project, government had to provide a number of fiscal incentives and guarantee the stability of the project against changes in the legal environment, especially in the years of the mine's operations. That sort of gave an impression of what government was doing as part of its own responsibility. Can you shed more light on this?
Definitely. What the government did was to provide support to the company.
Okay.
Because we all know that significant investment has to be made. And during the initial stages of the project, the returns were not going to be that high.
Yeah.
So in order to help the company to survive those initial years, certain concessions had to be made. So the discussion with the Ministry of Finance granted certain tax concessions to the company. Import tax on equipment, certain waivers and all that were granted to the company under a tax concession agreement. Then also under the development agreement, we provided stability terms so that in the immediate future, during the period of the development agreement, any new introductions of fiscal regimes would not affect them, so that they will have a stable environment within which to work to progress the projects and gain the revenues that we need.
The president mentions a figure, and I just wanted to clarify what that figure is. That he says the initial investment of the redevelopment project is $881 million. I think that's what you mentioned.
Yes.
Correct, $1 million. That's Anglo Gold's investment?
Exactly,
okay.
For a period of 6 years. So
okay.
We're looking at 6 years is the period that we're going to be constructing a lot of the infrastructure, bringing in new equipment and so on and so forth. So for those 6 years, you basically don't make any money. And that's the critical period that the Honorable Deputy Minister refers to. And during that period, we'll be pumping in about $881 million.
Okay, so explain to me in specific terms. I wanted to make this conversation about the people,
yep.
But about the economy as well, so that people can appreciate how tangible this is. So all this investment, what specifically is it going into, and how does that translate into lives?
All right. So because during that period, we're not making money, you can say it's all costs. And that cost covers capital investment, bringing in new equipment, even the employees you are employing and paying. The power you are going to
How many do you expect to employ? Just quickly on that.
So in general, by steady state, we'll be employing between 2,000 to 2,500 people at steady state. Okay. Steady state production will get there in about 3 years' time. And over and above that 2,000 to 2,500 people, during the construction period, that is the first key construction period during the first 2 years, we will be employing short-term people or people on a short-term contract, working through contractors and so on. That could easily be between 750 to 1,000. That is over and above the 2,000 to 2,500 people we would be employing during steady state.
Okay.
And I must clarify that that 2,000 to 2,500 people is comprising of direct employees as well as people employed through our major contractors.
Okay. You were explaining how the specifics, how these figures you're investing will affect lives.
Exactly. Yeah. So the employment I mentioned, obviously, as you employ people, it impacts their social livelihood and so on. But still on employment, what we're doing is that we want the impact of the mine's presence to be felt more within the community. So we've introduced the local employment procedure, which targets the local communities on our concession and prioritizes giving them jobs in certain categories of, I would say, skills. And that is being done targeted at them. Obviously, people will get contracts. Local businesses will get contracts. What we are seeking to do is to emphasize on the value that local businesses get out of the value chain of the mine. So, for instance, we've awarded a mining contract, which is the biggest contract by far in any mining operation. We're not going to do the mining ourselves, underground mining. We've given it out on contract. As we stand now, you know, Obuasi is an underground mine. There's no Ghanaian company with the expertise to do mechanized underground mining. But looking at this huge amount that is being pumped into that contract, we've taken steps to ensure that we've awarded that contract to a joint venture between an experienced foreign-owned but Ghana-registered company and a wholly owned Ghanaian company. It's a 70-30 joint venture arrangement. What this means is that the money we pump into that contract, 30% goes into Ghanaian entrepreneurs, the hands of Ghanaian entrepreneurs. Okay. But most importantly, over the contract period, we give the Ghanaian entrepreneur or business the opportunity to develop that mechanized underground mining skills that I mentioned earlier doesn't currently exist. So you never know. If that company comes to the table as well, 5 years down the line, they could be standing on their own, they could be bidding for contracts on their own, or they could actually go out of Ghana to bid for contracts.
And this is a contract worth $375 million?
Exactly. Yeah. Over a period of about 5 years.
5 years. So that's directly, and I think you're talking about the African Underground Mining Services?
It is.
That is a Ghanaian partner?
No, the joint venture company is Underground Mining Alliance, UMA.
Okay.
And the joint venture partners is made up of AUMS, the Underground African Underground Mining Services, and the Ghanaian partner called Rockshore International.
Okay, and so that is how this will affect individual lives?
Exactly, through contracts. And by the way, this is just an example. The same principle is being applied in other contracts that we give out. So far, some of the initial contracts we've issued, we've tried to target the local businesses in Obuasi. So for instance, we're refurbishing our houses. We target local businesses that are from Obuasi itself. That's businesses owned by Obuasi indigenes. We're constructing new cubicles, or I would say structures for temporary accommodation by contractors. It goes to Obuasi contractors. Those sort of things, so that the impact is not felt only nationally, but directly on the ground as well. Over and above these, we then step into the other corporate social investment initiatives that we embark on. As part of the redevelopment agreement we have with government, there is a trust fund that the company set up and funded. As far back in 2005, thereabout. We're going to increase the contribution of the company into the trust fund. So for each ounce of gold that we produce, we're going to put $2 into that trust fund. Now, that's not a trust fund that is managed or controlled by the company. It is controlled by a steering committee and a board made up of representatives and community leaders from the host communities. They see the money come in, they determine which projects they want to invest in. we have just a seat on that steering committee and on the board as well. That becomes something that provides seed money. The trust fund can invest, use some for current projects, and then leave some for future projects as well.
I see. Madam Jesse, I'm assuming that all that Eric just laid out was part of the negotiations.
Exactly.
Is government happy with what you just heard?
Government is really excited about it, especially the joint venture that they have set up, which is going to enable the local company also to gain that expertise. And in the near future, it could also set up to do deep underground mining. And we'll have our first local company doing this, and it could also employ more Ghanaians. And to support what he indicated regarding local content, we know that once the mine starts working and is awarding contracts, that is the way that more people gain employment. It is not just the direct employment provided by the mining company, but through the contracts that it gives to other companies that will provide services and products to the mine. More people gain employment. And this is why we are looking at actually developing a local content policy for the mining sector. Currently, what we have is a mining list, which is provided by the Minerals Commission, a list of
we don't have a proper local content mining policy?
We are now working on one. So the Minerals Commission has a list of mining products and services which mining companies are required to procure locally because we know they are available. For instance, grinding media, cables, electrical cables, PVC pipes, those kind of items we know is available locally, and then it is made mandatory for the mining companies to procure these locally. So as my colleague indicated, we want to move the mining company from being an enclave and rather build it into the general economy. And the only way we can do this is make sure that more companies benefit from the value chain of the mining sector. And this is why government has developed a new policy, which we call the National Supplier Development Policy. And this is a policy that is looking at supporting local companies, build capacity to produce and support the mining sector. In that way, the entire economy benefits from mining.
And Mrs. Dr. Sumag, I'll come to you shortly, but just before, one more point to Eric. The reason why this conversation is important is that there's a general skepticism about mining in Ghana, and rightly so, right? Because I remember I was in Takwa doing some work, and I'm like, oh Christ, is this how this roads I'm driving on in Takwa? Very famous for gold. Obuasi is, in fact, the president yesterday talked about the roads in Obuasi. And so rightly, people are very skeptical when they hear businesses like yourself. And I know you spend a lot of money to try and get people to understand that you're not exploiting and just leaving. Can you let me understand how all that you've just laid out now is different from what we're used to, the business as usual, the way things have been run until now? Because we cannot continue business as usual. I think the president himself is very aware of that. Sure. Government is as well. So how is that different from the way you've operated before?
Well,
and especially also because of Obuasi is such a celebrated mine all the way. Sure. You've operated, so the lessons must come from Obuasi. Sure. How is that different? What's the difference?
Well, to start with, I agree that there is more that can be done in terms of lifting the level standard of living in the mining communities and so on, the infrastructure, the state of the infrastructure and so on and so forth. But I think as a nation, when we have that conversation, we should take a step back and try not to pin it on particular sectors or particular areas. To get that right, it has to be a concerted effort by all stakeholders, including government, mining companies. We have to bring it all together. And I'm sure I'll get other opportunities to explain that further. But if I go back to what we are doing as a mining company, that is very different. Yeah. The emphasis is very much on ensuring that Ghanaian businesses participate actively in the value chain of the mine.
I thought we had that already.
Well, if you take, for instance, at the moment, the mining list that we have, that is issued by the Minerals Commission, we as a company, and I can only talk on behalf of AngloGold Ashanti, we see that as the minimum requirement in terms of how we support local businesses. So the example I gave in terms of the joint venture that we've encouraged and the fact that we are applying that principle in other contracts. It's not a requirement by law. It's something that we have voluntarily, working with government, obviously, and encouragement from the government, been able to set up. So if we continue to push the value we contribute into the economy through those avenues, then obviously the contribution that you bring into the economy becomes sustainable. I personally like that. If you give me participation of local businesses in the value chain, if you ask me to choose that against building toilets, school walls, and so on, I would always choose that. But the good thing is that we don't have to choose in between the two. We can do the other corporate social investment initiatives whilst pursuing these as well. And I think that's the fundamental change that we've introduced.
Dr. Mathial, you've heard both the government and AngloGold convinced that things are now changing with this reopening of the mine, with what you've just heard, the approaches now.
Well, for the purpose of education, let me state that this is a regulated industry. So many of the things that my good friend, the MD and the Deputy Minister allude to are requirements of law. Mr. Subontain talks about huge investments to be made. But it is also the case that all these investments are recoverable. And if you look at our laws, we allow them to recover all these capital investments over a 5-year period, 20% annually. And so it is not like a gift. We allow them to recover the cost before they begin to pay tax. They come into a tax-paying position. Again, let me also say that the last time I looked at the typical mining industry budget, I realized that the bulk of the revenue actually comes through, not revenue to the company really, but to the, in terms of corporate spend is actually with the procurement. And so I'm really enthused that they are paying a lot of attention to local procurements, because that is how we retain value within the national economy. Okay. I also like the idea about the joint ventureship and all that. I think these are the kinds of things that I see going a bit over what is regulatorily required. And I think I will encourage them to do much more. But going forward, I want to see how AngloGold Ashanti as a mine integrates its operations into the local economy. Okay. If you look at the mining list, something as basic as activated carbon.
What is that?
It's something like charcoal. Okay. It's really produced from palm kernel shell and coconut shell. These are the two main raw material for the production of activated carbon. And we import these. All the mining companies import these. I've been doing some work in the Prestia Huni Valley municipality, trying to help them develop a local economic development and growth strategy. And the strategy is hinged on integrating the mine into the local economy. One of the things that we've done, and I'm happy to learn that the municipality has found an investor through the One District, One Factory to set up an activated carbon plant. What this means is that if the plant, the mining company shuts down in future, the activated carbon will still be produced and supplied to other mines outside the district, and even beyond Ghana. So these are the kinds of things that I want us to be doing, innovative things that leads to still skills acquisition, which are transferable to other sectors of the national economy beyond the mine life. And so I will encourage AngloGold. I know they are able to do it, and they can do it if they mean to do it. And as the MD indicated, they've started something. What we need is for the company to work much closer with the assemblies. And the assemblies will also have to draw their own lessons. From the EITI perspective, what we find is that the assembly's share of royalties that are disbursed from central government to the local governments are often misused by the assemblies. Okay. The chunk of it gets spent on recurrent expenditure items, painting buildings, stationery, allowances, and all that. You find that a lot more even goes into garbage collection. The assemblies, by practice, treat their share of mineral royalty as IGF.
I see.
And that is worrying, because you expect for a depletable resource, you expect that the revenue that is allocated to this trade will be invested in viable businesses to create jobs for the community and to leave a legacy beyond the mine life. And so we need, that's why I started my intervention by saying that all stakeholders will have to draw lessons. Government itself will have to draw lessons. We have a mining list, as Madam Otinjesi alluded to, but what is happening is that local contractors get the contract and they take off to China to bring. So it's not really the kind of a mining list or a kind of a local content regulation.
But can you blame them? We don't have the capacity.
That is why government need to, and I've actually suggested to government, I once had the opportunity of engaging the vice president on some of the things that we could do as a country. And I suggested that we should align, especially for mining districts, we should align the one district, one factory project to the mining list and provide support to those who want to provide mine inputs. Look, I've also had the opportunity of serving on the adjudicating board of the National Mining Industry Awards. And consistently you find that there's only one company that is producing grinding media locally. The rest are all procuring from outside. We are importing. And therefore, by the fact that you are importing, you are shipping jobs outside the economy. Two, you are also shipping value, because the one who exports is the one who retains the greater value. And so I think we need to do innovative things, and all of us, not just the company, government, local authorities, civil society, we all need to draw our lessons and design a strategy that helps us to retain greater value in the mining sector that we are getting.
You know, the point, and Madam, I'll come back to you to give me some reaction to what we just said. We'll take a quick break. When we come, we'll do that. The reason why this conversation is also very important is there are volumes of books written about the Obuasi experience. Just go to any bookshop, just go to Google and search Obuasi. You find volumes of international work. Professors have come from all over the world to come and study the Obuasi experience, and the conclusions often are not great. And it begs the question, and that's why we're having this. There's a new chapter in Obuasi. We need to do things differently. And we've heard a lot of things that, as Dr. Simatea said, it gives cause for a lot of hope and satisfaction. But as you know, we still have to keep at it until we see the difference. We'll take a short break. When we return, we need to ask the fundamental question of Anglo Gold. We've learned what is in it for us as a people. What is in it for Anglo Gold, really? We'll talk about that when we return. And then we'll also hear the reaction from government to the concerns that Dr. Matiel and others have raised about, the president in fact even raised it. If you go to, when they say this mining is happening in Obuasi, when I go there, I'm expecting to see a town that is so developed, a town that looks like billions of dollars is coming from its earth. So apart from integration, what is a strategy to transform Obuasi from a point of infrastructure, but also from the economy? We'll delve into that when we return from the break. Stay with us. You're still live on PM Express here on the JoyNews channel. My guest in the studio, Barbara Otinjesi, is the Deputy Minister of Lands and Natural Resources. Eric Subonting is the Managing Director of Anglo Gold Ashanti. And Dr. Steve Matiel is the co-chair of the Ghana Extractive Transparency Initiative. Let me come to you, Madam Otinjesi, on the question that I teased before we went for the break. And from what Steve Matiel said, in fact, the President actually raised that concern as well, that we haven't seen a connection between what Obuasi's potential is and what, when you go to Obuasi, you find. And in fact, he made the point about how it's time to change that story. That Obuasi, the millions that go out of it must reflect in what Obuasi looks like when you go there. The roads are terrible. There's a lot of poverty still. How are we approaching that part of the conversation? Yeah,
we all recognize that. I come from a mining area.
Oh, good.
I'm the member of parliament for Pristia Huni Valley.
Oh, so I remember when you said that you smiled. That means I was wondering.
Yeah, and mining has taken place.
You were a victim.
You're a victim of that.
And mining has taken place in Pristia for over 100 years.
Oh, goodness.
Exactly, similar to Obuasi. And when you come to Pristia, you weep.
Yes.
It's the same as Obuasi. And the president at the last annual general meeting of the Chamber of Mines also expressed the sentiment, the same as he expressed
yesterday.
Exactly. And it's something that has to be done. The communities need to reflect the resources that they are generating. And that is why I indicated government, through the economic management team, has actually been tasked to look at how this can be done. That is why the national supplier policy has come up. It's to generate local entrepreneurs who can supply these products to the mining sector. And by building these companies up to produce and supply to the mining companies, that way we retain the revenues. And my colleague indicated that the mining list is not exactly successful because most of the people go and they import. That is true. The person may not have the capacity now, may start out by importing, but will graduate down the line into local production. I'll give you an example that I'm familiar with. Tropical Cable and Conductor Limited. Okay. It didn't start out as a local manufacturing. Production. Exactly. It started out importing, working with some Indian companies. And then down the line, set up the production base, and it's now producing electrical cables for the industry. So I think that is how we can support our local entrepreneurs to grow into huge companies, to take advantage of the mining industry and generate the revenues that we need to retain locally.
That is one aspect. My aspect is I think the ignorance part, because I'm looking at when I go to Prisia, what's the name of it?
Prisia Huni Valley.
Prisia Huni Valley. I reversed it.
The mining revenues come to government.
I want to see good roads.
Exactly.
I want to see nice houses. I want to see nice infrastructure like
the mining revenues come to government. It goes into a general port and is dispersed across the country to support all regions of the country.
The mining community shouldn't be poorer than in physical terms that I see.
That is why now we have introduced the MDF fund, where we can
what
actually
is that, by the way?
The Minerals Development Fund, where we can actually allocate parts of those revenues to the communities that are generating the revenue to be used locally, so that they can support the infrastructure locally. So that is also an aspect where we can help to transform. But I think the critical thing is to ensure that we have more local partners in there, more local entities in there, because that's the only way you can retain the revenues locally and do the transformational work that is required to be done.
Eric, I'll come to you shortly, but Doc, I'm approaching this like a normal Ghanaian. I don't understand all these technicalities, right? All I understand is when I drive to Prisia Huni Valley and Takwa and Obuasi, my shocks, I'll change my shocks. In fact, I must tell you, I traveled to Takwa, came back, I had to change my shocks, right? So my question is, I understand all that local content, give the thing to local people so that they build the capacity, retain the economy. But how does that directly translate into fantastic roads in Obuasi, in Huni Valley? Fantastic buildings, like all that we see in Accra. This is what baffles me. How do we do that? Because you have examples elsewhere. Yeah. In South Africa, some of these fantastic towns and cities that we go visit in South Africa were developed with money from gold. True or false?
That is true.
So why can't we do that here?
Well, we need to address this problem from two main fronts. If you look at what we are doing in the petroleum sector, and I will admit a lot of it are borrowed from lessons from the mining sector. So we developed a framework that guides how we use mining sector revenues to bring about development, especially in communities that are impacted by oil activities. So if you look at Section 24 of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, it makes a point that if any community is negatively impacted by oil and gas activities, that community shall be compensated through the petroleum revenues. This is beyond the normal budgetary allocations to those communities that may be impacted. In the mining sector, what do we have? We have set aside a portion of the royalties to address these kinds of challenges, the unintended consequences of mining, such as poor roads and the rest. This is 20% in all. 10% is set aside purposely for distribution to the impacted communities for development activities. The Office of the Administrator of Stool Land is responsible for the distribution. And the law allows the Office of the Administrator of Stool Lands to take 1% of the 10% to cover its administrative cost. The 9% that is left is converted into a whole, and 55% of it is allocated to the assembly, the law says, for development projects. The other 45% is shared between the stool and the traditional council, in 25 to the stool, 20 to the traditional council. And the law says for the maintenance of the stool in keeping with its status.
Fantastic law. I don't see it on the ground.
Now, the reason you don't see it on the ground is that the assembly, as I indicated earlier, have been abusing their share of royalties because they treat it as IGF.
Okay, so we know
so
that.
Largely,
so
they
why
are not
aren't you fixing that problem?
So it is up to the supervising ministry, and I guess, Madam, it's your ministry, isn't it? The MDF. They will have to ensure, develop guidelines. In fact, the EITI's Multi-Stakeholder Steering Committee, which I co-chair, developed guidelines for the utilization of mineral royalties at the district level when we came across this problem. But we did not have the power to implement. We only had to hand it over to the Minister of Lands and Natural Resources. It was then Honorable Osa Mills. Exactly. I don't know whether it reflected in the handing over notes to the current minister, but we don't see any progress on that front. Yeah. But the good thing about the MDF as passed into law now, because the current practice was based on an administrative fiat until 2016 when we backed it with law. The good thing about the new law is that beyond the 10% that goes to a community, there's another 20% of another 10%, which is set aside for the sustenance of the industry. That is supposed to go to set up mining community development schemes. Mm-hmm. Now, these monies are supposed to be disbursed to the districts, but they are not being disbursed 2 years or 3 years into the passage of the law.
Let me ask another basic question, and forgive me if I'm asking, but this is the question that every Ghanaian will ask, really, if you've been to enough places. Is it that government is not, because the money is coming, because the president said 2 billion you're going to make from all the monies that Eric will be paying to us, to the Ministry of Finance. Is the government is not prioritizing, setting up, taking huge chunks and putting to Obuasi, Presiahuni Valley, Takwa and Co. and say, if you're getting 2 billion, Takwa, you contributed, okay, so this is Obuasi alone, 2 billion, right? Yeah. So get 10 million, whatever, and develop your road. It might be ignorant. Why can't you do that?
No, it's not ignorant. Actually, it obeys the principle of equity in resource allocation.
So why can't we do that?
So he who contributes more
exactly
commensurate size.
In 22, you're going to get $2 billion. That's what the president said. I mean, if you take 10% of, well, 10% is too much. I mean, whatever, 5%, that will transform Obuasi significantly. Yeah. Why can't you do that? Why can't you have affirmative action, something like that for that? They say, okay, 2 billion, every year you get X amount of money for Obuasi alone. No, before we even touch the rest of the national economy.
But it is precisely that equity issue that is being addressed through the Mineral Development Fund Act. I come from a Piapeman thing. We don't get any share of royalty because we don't produce gold. Obuasi, beyond the District Assembly Common Fund, is entitled to a share of royalty.
And yet, they became a ghost town.
Yes, because they misapplied.
And the roads were terrible. So, in fact, yesterday, the president was... How many years has Obuasi been producing gold? More than a century.
Yeah, more than a century.
And we are here in 2019, the president still complaining about roads in Obuasi.
This is where I keep saying we need to draw lessons. And so the ministry will have to be up and doing in ensuring that the MDF is not abused on the ground. And that it is channeled into good roads, water, schools, and the rest that the people need. So I want to I would like to hear from Madame, for instance,
and I'm so happy.
What plans
I'm so happy when she said, I come from Presiahuni Valley. And so you said she's a victim. She is. So I'm wondering.
But she has opportunity now to address that.
Yeah, we have seen the problem. And it's an issue that those of us from mining areas always advocate, that more of the resources should come to develop our areas. But we also know the challenges that government faces.
Competing needs.
Exactly.
But you're the goose that lays the golden egg. You should get a chunk of that egg.
Thank you.
So fight for it.
And it's an issue that we have been advocating for years. Now we have the MDF fund. Definitely, it's not adequate to be constructing roads and all that. that still has to come from central government. True. The MDF fund, what comes to the districts, can do things like schools, maybe hospital equipment, things like that. But we know that constructing roads is very expensive.
Very expensive.
And the MDF fund that comes to the district cannot do roads.
That's exactly my point. 2 billion.
But even, you see, the companies are also partly to blame.
Oh, I'm coming to him actually now. Because I reserve it for last. Eric, respond to that.
Yeah, he just started. That is why another program that the ministry has initiated is engaging the mining companies to look at the roads within the mining areas and see how best they can support government to do these roads. And Goldfields has just done a very nice road all the way from Takwa through Aboso, Huni Valley, all the way to Dama. Yeah. So we are engaging the mining companies to see who they can take up some of these roads and do them to that standard.
Eric, please respond.
Yeah, I want to touch on the reason why my colleague, Dr. mentioned that the companies are to blame.
Yes.
He's not, and we had a conversation before coming into the studio. He's not saying the companies are to blame because they are not doing enough. He's saying the companies are to blame because they go ahead and do too much and take the responsibility of what the local governments are supposed to do. So, for instance, the road construction that you mentioned. But then the companies do a lot on the ground through our corporate social investment. I happen to be the president of the Ghana Chamber of Mines. So I know that in 2017 alone, across the industry, I mean, amongst the chamber, members of the chamber, we invested about $18 million in a year alone in terms of our corporate social investments. If you take Obuasi, I mentioned the hospital, the school. The hospital that we run in Obuasi that we continue to run even when we haven't been producing is arguably the second best in the Ashanti region, right? And we've maintained it. 80% of people who access the hospital are from the community. As at now, it's not from. And we have a trust fund that invests in education, water and sanitation, health, and all those sort of things. So companies do those things, but like the Honorable Minister has mentioned, introducing structure around how we invest and apply the revenue that gets to the local communities or local authorities is very important. What I like about the Mineral Development Fund is that it's not just an apportionment of money going to the communities. There are structures, it defines structures that should guide how those funds are applied. It sets up committees that brings on board even labor unions, as well as the companies themselves sitting at the table and say, how do we apply these funds? Is the fund functional now?
Is it functional now?
Yes, it's functional, but the schemes are not functional.
Functioning. So when would that happen?
Very soon the schemes will be set up. Okay. So that the schemes will also be.
1 week, 2 months, 3 months, a year? Any idea?
I was surprised if she gave us a date.
A date. Okay, but final question to you, Eric. What is in this for you?
For us, we've stuck with the Obuasi mine throughout these difficult periods because we had faith in the mine. The Obuasi has a very rich ore body. I say it's a world-class ore body. In other words, the opportunity exists. What has been missing over the years has been how to get value out of that. So our challenge now going forward is to be able to turn that world-class ore body into a world-class mine. And how we operate the mine is going to determine how we do that. And I believe the measures we have put in place, including mechanizing the mining. At first, we used to do manual mining. We're stopping that. So if you were at the function yesterday, we have equipment that we've purchased to the tune of about 45 million already on the ground, going to do mechanized mining, and we'll be employing highly skilled people to operate those equipment.
That is still what is in it for us.
Yeah, I'll get
What is in it for you?
Yeah, I'll get
I just
there.
have a minute to wrap up, so I want to
no problem.
Returns on investment.
Yes, yes. So that's what I'm trying to get him to tell me.
I'll get there. So the 2.16 billion the president mentioned is a portion of that total revenue pie. That is just direct money going to government. If you look at the total value going into the economy, it's about 5.3 billion. It represents over 51% of the total revenue pie. So you take that out, the remaining is what we used to pay the investment that we've pumped into the project. as well as the interest on borrowings that we would have had to go in for to be able to fund such a project. Then obviously you get the leftover for shareholders, because normally shareholders are the last to be paid. Yeah. That's the reality of life.
But they're happy with you now?
I think if they weren't happy with the project and they didn't have confidence in the project, they wouldn't have been making this big decision. However, the challenge lies ahead of us. At this stage, it's plans. We have to turn those plans into reality. Yeah. And if we are unable to do that, then obviously it's not the shareholders that will punish us, obviously, but the investors, other investors and the market in general as well. Okay. So it would impact our share price. If you have such a quality asset in your portfolio and you operate it well, the benefit you get goes beyond just the direct profit you get. Okay. It enhances your entire portfolio so that your share prices appreciate as well. I'm grateful
that you joined us. Madam Tujusi, so when this 22 years elapses, can you confidently tell us that we won't return to a ghost town where roads are not fixed?
That is the plan. And the president is committed.
You're confident that will happen?
Well, I'll do my work. I'll be the police monitoring.
Yeah. Grateful that you all joined us. My name is Evans Mensah. Enjoy the rest of your evening.